Primetime, Europe is confronting its biggest migration emergency in years. Tens of thousands have crossed into Spain's enclave of Ceuta, dozens are feared dead, and the crisis is already reshaping border policy across the continent. Is Europe facing a humanitarian tragedy, a security crisis, or both? Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Katie Wilson. First this evening, Morocco says it believes close to a dozen people died in last week's mass surge of migrants into the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. But Rabat says it's still verifying reports of deaths on the Spanish side of the border, where Spain says more than 70 people have died.
The aftermath of last week's unprecedented migrant surge into Spain's North African enclave of Ceuta is continuing after more than 50,000 people crossed into the territory by land and sea. More than 48,000 people have since returned to Morocco, while more than 1,000 have been treated by health services. In Ceuta, migrant Mohamed Sahil described the conditions he says many are experiencing.
It's difficult to have a shower, to eat, to drink water. It's very difficult here. Right now, it's very difficult. There are lots of migrants, there are soldiers here, there are police. You can't just go out onto the street in peace.
Migrants who crossed into Ceuta last week spent the night sleeping on a cordoned-off beach and gathered around campfires as police and military patrols remained in the area while authorities worked to restore normality. Police have also completed the installation of a 500-metre floating barrier off Ceuta's border with Morocco to help prevent further crossings. In Madrid, demonstrators gathered outside the Moroccan embassy, protesting what they described as an invasion of migrants into Ceuta.
Defending Spain means defending the nation where we were born, where we grew up, and where we live. Nowadays, it seems that the very idea of defending Spain is considered an offence. Well, no, sir, it is not an offence. We must defend Spain.
Meanwhile, Italy suspended passport-free Schengen travel arrangements with Spain for 1 month. Then 22 European Union member states wrote a letter asking for coordinated action to protect external borders. However, Spain says those people who entered the enclave irregularly could not travel on to mainland Spain or elsewhere in the Schengen zone. Morocco says it remains committed to countering illegal migration and has called for the burden of managing migration to be shared.
And joining us now from Morocco is former Spanish Ambassador Gustavo de Aristegui. Thank you for joining us on the programme this evening. Now, what caused the crowds to flock to Ceuta? Was it misinformation on social media, or was it something more organised?
It is a mix of many factors. There has been an ongoing process of legalization of illegal migrants in Spain that has been going on for the whole of 2026. Government was hoping to legalize 500,000 migrants, and today there is already numbers that exceed 1,250,000 migrants. Specialists are saying that that number is going to be reached, is going to be surpassed very soon, and that the numbers most likely will reach 1.5 million illegal migrants that are going to be legalized. This has been a very clear calling factor. Everybody that knew about this was trying to flock to the Spanish borders to try to cross over into Spain and try to get their papers and their legalization. The second thing is that there has been a ruling of the Spanish Supreme Court that says that anybody reaching Spanish shores swimming cannot be expelled immediately. It has to go through a different channel. And thirdly, there was all kinds of rumors on social media saying that the legalization of illegal migrants was still going on, and that if they reached Spain before midnight of last Thursday or Friday, they would not be able to be expelled. And there is also, of course, it needs to be said that the ruling of the Supreme Court came out late June, and the government has not done anything at all in 1 month. They could have reinforced the borders of Ceuta and Melilla. They could have sent reinforcement to Melilla. None of them has been done. It is very important to note that what the Supreme Court said is that if you violate any kind of obstacle or any kind of barrier, then you can be expelled immediately. This is the reason why they're installing this ridiculous buoy, which can be immediately jumped over. But in the moment that you jump over the buoy, then you become liable to be expelled immediately. So it's just a legal matter that has been the cause or the reason of the installation of this buoy. And last but not least, there has been some very hostile statements made by normally countries or administrations that are allies and friends of Spain that are completely unbelievable, if you ask me. There have been a vote in the Appropriations Committee of the United States House of Representatives that is chaired by Representative Mario Diaz-Balart, who I know very well, an old friend of mine, and Mr. Diaz-Balart has earmarked $20 million to support the claims of Morocco on Spanish territory. Let us be very clear. Ceuta and Melilla are Spanish and have been Spanish for centuries. Melilla since 1497 and Ceuta since 1570. And before that in Roman times, of course, and in the Visigothic kingdom again, but that is going a little too far. In any case, there is no claim of colonial rule against Spain in the United Nations. It is not a territory to be decolonized, which is not the case, for example, of Gibraltar. There are two completely different cases. And there was also a very hostile statement by the ambassador of Israel to the United Nations, who claimed that the Spanish government had a double standard, saying that Spain was holding a colonial territory in Morocco, which is absolutely not true. And this is, quite frankly, confusing the government of Spain with Spain as a nation as a whole or as a people. And it's trying to punish one government, one prime minister it's like giving us, the whole Spanish people, a kick in the shin and not the government. The affected, the victims here of this encouragement by the United States of America, even the State Department, the U.S. House of Representatives, the American Enterprise Institute, and the Ambassador of Israel to the United Nations. It's quite frankly a very unfriendly gesture.
So let's get into more of that international fallout there, which you're kind of touching upon. And I want to focus on Italy. Now, the Italian government, they've named Spain as a soft touch on migration. How do you view that assessment, and what are some other EU countries, some other Schengen countries making of this?
Well, there's two very different things here that need to be analyzed. First is how different countries perform throughout the year. And Greece and Italy receive twice as many illegal migrants than Spain does. For example, those are the data. That's the data of 2025, very clearly, and the numbers of 2025 are extremely clear. It really is twice as many as in Spain. But a completely different thing, and this is where they're right, is that a crisis of this magnitude, and you were saying 50,000, now the regional government, the autonomous city authorities are making a new count and saying that it was actually 80,000 that actually crossed the border, 75,000 of which have already returned to Morocco. This is probably the single most massive invasion in European territory, European in the sense of sovereignty, of course, and it is, of course, very shocking for the governments. And the Schengen Treaty is very clear about that. Any member state can suspend the free movement and the free circulation of passengers and travelers when they feel, or there is proof, that the country is not defending the external common border properly. Of course, there is a system of double control. Anybody that is in Ceuta cannot go to Spain without the rest of Spain to the peninsula if they do not show proper papers, visas to board a ferry or a helicopter or any kind of transport. Last but not least, let us not forget that 22 nations that are members of the Schengen Treaty, among them the two remaining socialist governments of Europe, Malta and Denmark, were extremely harsh with Spain and the government of Spain that has shown an incredible incompetence and lack of efficiency in honoring its international commitments and obligations. And this is, quite frankly, a textbook case, of a calling effect on thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of migrants to come to Spain to join the legalization of foreign migrants. And it is a textbook case of incompetence and complete lack of professionalism on the part of the government of Spain.
Now, the Spanish government, what they're saying is that the crisis has been contained, Ceuta's not in the Schengen zone, so Moroccan migrants were never going to head for mainland Europe unchecked. What do you make of that assessment? Is the Spanish government downplaying this, or has there been a level of hysteria that was perhaps unjustified? What's your take?
Well, of course the government was downplaying it, and I find quite frankly scandalous that the Prime Minister of Spain during the crisis did not interrupt his vacations and showing videos of his playlist of choice in the middle of a national emergency. It is completely scandalous, if you ask me. But we need to understand one thing that is very clear. This is, or was, or continues to be a national emergency. The fact that it is true that the migrants cannot travel over to the peninsula to Spanish mainland does not in any way reduce or dilute the responsibility of the Spanish government, because already some ministers in the hard-left coalition that rules Spain were calling for those migrants to be shipped to mainland Spain, and that already would have been a huge, scandalous breach of the obligations of Spain in the Schengen Treaty.
And who are the winners in this situation, would you say? A Spanish journalist, Andrea Rizzi, wrote in Spain's El País newspaper that the global right wing are hyperventilating with happiness at this crisis. What do you make of that assessment?
Well, it's completely ridiculous, if you ask me. I mean, can you really say that the commissioner of the European Commission is a dangerous hard right winger? Can you really say that the Prime Minister of Denmark, who is a social democrat, is a dangerous fascist? Can you say that of the Prime Minister of Malta, who is also a socialist? Can you say that of the German coalition government that is a center-right and liberal coalition? I mean, this is insulting to 22 nations that have democratic governments and that have been extremely harsh in criticizing Spain. I think that the journalist in question should apologize to the countries, the governments, and the peoples of those nations. Right now in Europe, if they want to call Mrs. Meloni a hard right government, it is not for me to defend Mrs. Meloni, but I think that her policies and her way of governing is showing that she is more in the center-right spectrum than anything else. But they cannot hold themselves saying that it was the Finns and the Italians that were criticizing Spain and that they have right-leaning governments. It is the whole of Europe, 22 countries, and lots of them, two of them socialists, and many of them liberals or centrists, cannot be insulted and be called dangerous fascists or semi-fascist ideological extremists.
Do you think there is a potential for right-wing government to exploit this situation, as obviously migration has been a very sensitive issue and it's something that
migration is a very sensitive issue throughout the political spectrum. I mean, you were showing some images of the demonstration in front of the Moroccan embassy in Madrid today, and you could see Spanish flags, the constitutional flag of Spain, and you would see even Republican flags that are normally used by very extreme left-wing or left-leaning political parties or people of that affiliation. I completely disagree. I think that people in the center left, and even in the left, are very sensitive to illegal immigration in Europe. It is a very, very explosive topic in the social discourse, in the social debate in the whole of the continent. And look at what is happening in Germany. You have two very opposed political parties from the extreme left wing and from the extreme right wing. They're extremely critical of laxitude or soft policies with immigration. Nobody can be against immigration. We have to be against illegal immigration. Immigration has to be orderly, has to be legal, has to be controlled, has to be structured, so that we can all absorb the immigrants that obviously are going to be coming into our nations. We need the fresh population. We are living a natality winter of very grave proportions, and the only way to keep our societies running and rich and diverse and democratic and free is obviously by implementing a controlled, regulated, balanced, and legal immigration system. So no, I quite frankly think that if this is managed in a correct, in a balanced way, this should not necessarily be fuel for the extreme right wing in any way.
So you don't think this will be mentioned in Meloni's election campaign? She's up for election next year.
Well, I mean, there's many elections coming up next year, even in Spain, mind you, and or France. It's not just Meloni again. There's a lot of countries in Europe that are going to be entering an election cycle, and the very poor management that some governments have made of the migration issue is going to be at the forefront of the political debate. That is very obvious and without any doubt. And I think that the worst student of the class of management of immigration management is by far the Spanish government. The disastrous image that we have given the world. I mean, it was the front page of every newspaper in the globe, and it didn't matter if it was China or India or Argentina, Mexico, or Azerbaijan. It is an issue that has shocked public opinion around the world.
And what about Rabat? What has Rabat said, in particular in regards to the 72 people who died?
Well, the local authorities and the civil guard are speculating that it might be close to 100 actually that lost their lives, and many were not only died drowned in the ocean, in the Mediterranean Sea, but some people that died in the stampede. This is important to be noted. Listen, 80,000 people is a human wave. It's very difficult to control. If there was in any way the intention of sending a political message to the Prime Minister of Spain, something that cannot be ruled out, it was probably, maybe sending a wave of 2,000, 3,000, maybe even 10,000, as was the case back in 2021, which was a very clear political message of irritation of Morocco with the Prime Minister of Spain and his government because of an incident involving the admission to hospital of the leader of the Polisario, but which was a huge mistake on the part of the Spanish government. By the way, these things need to necessarily be informed and coordinated with the Moroccan authorities. Of course, sending a wave of people to show irritation is not the way to respond to these things. In any case, I do think that the 80,000, the sheer numbers, were more of the rumors that have been spreading in social media, and that I think that it surprised everybody, except the intelligence service of Spain and the police and the civil guard, that were claiming that they had been telling the authorities, the delegate of the government in the autonomous city and the Minister of the Interior, that this was going to happen, and they simply were ignored. And that is a very serious political responsibility, and it needs to be looked in. And you know that the Spanish, the most important Spanish penal court, which is the Audiencia Nacional, has admitted a case against the authorities for complete criminal mismanagement of this crisis.
Really great to get your perspective and your insight on this. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Now, after the break, a suicide bombing has struck an anti-Taliban rally in northwestern Pakistan, killing at least 14 people and underscoring the country's worsening security crisis. We'll have more on that after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, you're watching Prime Time. A suicide bombing at a pro-police rally in northwestern Pakistan has killed at least 17 people and injured dozens more. The attack comes as the country faces a sharp rise in militant violence along its western border.
Mourners gathered on Monday for the victims of a suspected suicide bombing in Pakistan's northwestern Swat Valley. The blast struck a pro-police rally outside a police station in the town of Kabul, where demonstrators had gathered to demand peace and stronger action against militancy. Authorities say at least 17 people were killed and 34 others injured, with the death toll rising after several victims died in hospital. Police said officers confronted the attacker at the station entrance before he detonated an explosive vest. The Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, has claimed responsibility. The attack comes amid a sharp rise in militant violence in Pakistan's border regions. Military officials say more than 3,100 terrorist incidents have been recorded since January, and 819 people, including civilians and security personnel, have been killed. Pakistan accuses the Afghan Taliban of supporting militant groups operating across the border, an allegation Kabul continues to deny.
Joining me now is Omar Samad, former Afghan ambassador to Canada and France, joining us from San Francisco. Thank you for joining us. Now, quite a disturbing incident this. What's your reaction to it?
Well, initial reaction, of course, is dismay and sadness to hear that there's another attack, that the tension between the two countries is ongoing. That there are victims, even though sometimes there are military or paramilitary victims, and at times civilians are caught in the crossfire. But this tension, as you know, goes back to last year when countries accused each other of fomenting some type of destabilization and insecurity. As you know, Pakistan accuses the Taliban in Afghanistan of giving sanctuary to TTP, as you mentioned in your clip, and Afghanistan denies it and says that it is mainly a problem that needs to be solved inside Pakistan. So this obviously has taken a toll and continues to take a toll.
And given that situation, do you see a realistic pathway where these two governments can build trust with each other?
That's what the aim should be. I'm not exactly clear on whether the motivations and the intentions from either side, especially the Pakistani military side, which is a much stronger country. It has many more resources. It has ways to deal with insecurity inside its country. They have to make an extra effort, in my opinion. So far, in the past year or so, we have seen several countries, including Qatar, we have seen Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and even China just a few months ago, tried to mediate between Afghanistan and Pakistan. That has not yet resulted in any breakthroughs or any positive pathways, as you call it. I think that there is still a chance for diplomacy to work and ways to somehow deal with the situation through negotiations and talks. And I hope that the two sides will realize that the continuation of violence is to neither side's advantage, neither to the regional stability that many countries seek in that part of the world.
How concerned are you about escalation, that this could grow further into a wider regional conflict?
I am concerned. I think that escalation is an option for those who want to not take the path of talks and mediation. I think that if the political will is to escalate, whether it's from the Pakistani side or whether it's the TTP or the Afghans unable to control the situation in terms of what TTP does, there are a lot of questions that have to be answered. There's a lot that we don't really know. I think that whatever intelligence is gathered needs to be shared. If they share intelligence, if they share more information with each other, I think that might de-escalate the situation. But that requires the political will to talk, and that doesn't exist at this moment. So escalation is unfortunately a path that seems to be more attractive to the sides involved right at this stage.
And obviously the TTP and Afghanistan's Taliban, they're separate organisations, but they do maintain close ties. How does the relationship between those two organisations complicate the security picture in the region?
Well, that's a very good question. If you go back into the origins of the TTP and the Afghan Taliban, which predates the TTP, you realize that the TTP was actually encouraged to form itself out of different various factions inside Pakistan in about 15 years ago, more or less. And the TTP has grown since then, has had demands made of the Pakistani state. It considered itself as a Pakistani militant group that has grievances and wants to address them with the Pakistani state. But the military in Pakistan over the past 2-3 years has taken on a different approach. They are much more kinetic and using military means. So the TTP has had a relationship with the Afghan Taliban that has gone through ups and downs, and obviously they have linkages, but to say that the TTP is supported or that it's given sanctuaries by the Afghan Taliban, I think is probably not very, has very strong evidence, even though there are families of TTP fighters who have been forced to flee to Afghanistan, and they may be around in Afghanistan. But as far as a militant hub is concerned, that requires intelligence data to prove that, in my opinion.
It's interesting you say that, and could you talk us through the responses that both sides have given to this attack?
Well, this particular attack, this is the latest attack, one of many that has happened over the last, as we said, year or so. We had a flare-up in October last year, which caused many casualties. You know, the Afghans have basically lost many civilians in these attacks. It seems like the Pakistanis, when they retaliate or when they are on the offensive, they seem to attack targets that contain civilians. So, including that one medical facility near Kabul that, according to the United Nations, according to Human Rights Watch, and many other organizations, where more than 200 Afghans died. So those were mainly civilians. On the Pakistani side, it seems that TTP is mainly trying to target Pakistani military and paramilitary forces. And the two sides obviously are blaming each other. So there's a blame game going on. That's being said through social media. There's a rhetoric that is going on, propaganda, if you want, in some cases. trying to lay the blame on each other. And I think that that's something that needs to be tackled. That's something that needs to be addressed as well. And the only way to do so is to de-escalate, maybe have China or any other country again mediate and agree to mediation and start talks again by looking at evidence and facts instead of hearsay or blame games that don't really prove anything for one side or the other.
And finally, Ambassador, in the coming days, the coming weeks, what will you be keeping an eye on in regards to this situation?
I think I am concerned about what the strategic impulses are here, what the strategic motivations may be. So what is driving this from the Pakistani perspective? What is driving this from the Afghan Taliban perspective in terms of being on the defensive, but at the same time only being able to do so much in order to resolve the issue? So I will be looking at the strategic impulses and signals that may give us a bit of a window into what actually is driving this and what are the goals, the final outcome that the Pakistanis seek, and what is the outcome that the Afghan Taliban are willing to help create. And I think that that would give us some insights into what could happen. But overall, I'm not very optimistic. I think that this tit for tat and this tension is going to stay with us for a while until one side or the other decides to change tactics and change strategy.
Very difficult situation, isn't it? Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us on the programme and for providing your thoughts.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Now, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents from around the globe. Do stay with us. Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. Hungary is facing an energy crisis after record low water levels on the Danube forced its only nuclear power plant to slash output. The government is asking homes and businesses to cut electricity use as another heatwave approaches. Pablo Gutierrez reports from Budapest.
Well, Hungary is entering one of the most challenging weeks for its energy system in decades. Behind me is a country that gets about half of its electricity from a single nuclear power plant. But today, that plant is running at only a fraction of its normal capacity because there is not enough water in the Danube River to cool its reactors. The PAX nuclear power plant has operated for more than 40 years, and this is the first time that record low river levels have forced such a drastic reduction in production. The Danube has fallen to historic lows after months of drought and heat across Central Europe. In Budapest, the river recently dropped to just 23 centimeters, the lowest level ever recorded. Near PAX, water levels are expected to fall below the minimum needed for normal cooling operations. That matters because nuclear power is the backbone of Hungary's electric system. Solar energy has expanded and can supply a large share of the demand during sunny afternoons. But once the sun goes down, the country depends on nuclear power, natural gas, and imported electricity to keep the lights on. Now, Prime Minister Peter Mayer says the next 5 days will be critical, with temperatures expected to reach 40 degrees Celsius, that's 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the government has asked households and businesses to reduce electricity use, and more than 300 companies, including MOL, that's the state oil company, Samsung, SDI, Audi, and Denso, have already cut their power consumption, reducing demand by about 400 megawatts. Now, officials say mandatory restrictions are not needed right now, but they remain an option if pressure on the grid increases. Now, the economic cost could also be significant. Members of the governing TISA party estimate Hungary may spend between 315 million to 630 million US dollars on imported electricity if the shutdown continues. For A News, Pablo Gutierrez, Budapest, Hungary.
Britain's economy could face a sharp slowdown if disruption to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz continues into next year. A new forecast warns that a prolonged closure of the key global trade route would drive up energy costs, fuel inflation, and could even push the UK economy into contraction. Zainab Farizadeh reports.
Britain's economy could shrink in 2027 if the Strait of Hormuz does not reopen to shipping before the middle of next year, according to a new forecast from EY. The accountancy firm's economists say a prolonged disruption to one of the world's most important oil shipping routes would push up oil and gas prices, keeping inflation higher for longer and weighing on economic growth. EY's central forecast assumes the strait reopens within the next couple of months. Under that scenario, the UK economy is still expected to grow over the next 2 years, with inflation reaching a lower peak later this year. However, if the strait remains closed into early or mid-2027, EY predicts UK growth will slow this year before the economy contracts next year. Inflation could climb above 6% by the end of 2026, adding to pressure on households and businesses. EY also expects the Bank of England to keep interest rates on hold for the rest of this year before beginning to cut them next year under its central forecast. The projections are broadly in line with the diverse scenarios published by the Bank of England last week, which examined the impact of significantly higher oil and gas prices. Even in that scenario, the bank forecasts the economy would continue to grow next year. Also, inflation will remain elevated. For now, economists say much depends on developments in the Middle East. The longer uncertainty around the Strait of Hormuz continues, the greater the risk that higher energy prices will spill over into the wider economy, affecting everything from transport and manufacturing to household bills. Zainab Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Turkey has stepped up its response to its recent wildfires, with prosecutors investigating dozens of forest blazes across the country. The authorities say multiple suspects have been arrested. Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
Turkish Justice Minister Hakan Gürlek says judicial investigations are underway into 44 separate forest fires that have broken out across 16 provinces since the beginning of June. Writing on social media, Gürlek said prosecutors had identified 29 suspects in connection with the blazes. 6 of those suspects have been arrested, he said, while 9 others have been released under judicial control measures. Another 6 remain in custody pending investigation, according to the Justice Minister. Gürlek noted that investigations were being coordinated by the Justice, Interior, and Agriculture ministries, as prosecutors work with the relevant institutions to determine the cause of the fires. He said the Department of Natural Disasters and Accidents, which functions under the Justice Ministry, was closely monitoring each stage of the judicial process. Gürlek said judicial efforts extend beyond crimes against people and property, but also seek to protect the country's forests, natural resources, and what officials describe as Turkey's green homeland. The investigations follow one of the country's most destructive wildfire seasons in years. In recent weeks, extreme heat, low humidity, and strong winds have fueled blazes across large parts of the country, especially in the Aegean and Mediterranean regions. These, in turn, have caused large-scale evacuations, have damaged forests, farmland, and homes, and stretched Turkey's firefighting resources. Last month, 10 people were killed, including forestry workers and rescue personnel, while battling a fast-moving blaze in Eskişehir province, marking the deadliest firefighting incident of the year. Authorities have warned that some fires appear to have been caused by human activity, as prosecutors continue to investigate whether negligence or deliberate acts played a role in the latest outbreaks. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Iran says talks with Oman are strictly bilateral and do not cover control of the Strait of Hormuz, warning that tensions will persist unless Washington lifts its blockade of Iranian ports and honours the ceasefire agreement. For more, Taras Shiralilu reports from the Iranian Foreign Ministry.
Iran's foreign ministry stressed that Tehran is not negotiating with Washington over the control of the Strait of Hormuz, confirming that the ongoing talks with Oman are bilateral. Spokesman Ismail Baghai stressed that there will be no change if the U.S. insists on continuing to blockade Iran's ports, and what he called violations of Washington's obligations under the ceasefire Memorandum of Understanding. Speaking at a weekly press conference on Monday, he welcomed China's mediation efforts to de-escalate tension in the region. He said while Tehran appreciates goodwill efforts by the regional and extra-regional countries, Pakistan remains the main channel of mediation. Meanwhile, the official neither confirmed nor rejected reports that Iran is going to receive shoulder-firing ground-to-air launchers from China, as reported in the press last week. He added that Tehran and Beijing have close relations and have signed a pact on strategic cooperation. During the briefing, the spokesman rejected reports that Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's visit to neighboring Iraq on Monday has an agenda to negotiate regional developments. According to Baghai, the visit is a routine trip to take part in the annual Arba'in morning ritual to pay his respect to the shrine of Imam Hussein in Karbala. Talking about Iran and Ukraine ties after an Iranian commercial ship was hit in the Caspian Sea, Baghai said Kiev's foreign minister claimed the strike was unintentional. However, the spokesman said remarks by other Ukrainian officials suggest that it was not the case, adding that Iran is waiting for further facts to decide on its response. Turaj Shiralilu from Iranian Foreign Ministry for A News.
Pakistan and Uzbekistan have agreed to expand their digital customs partnership. At a meeting in Tashkent, officials discussed measures aimed at strengthening security and tech-enabled trade. Mariam Zia has more from Islamabad.
Pakistan and Uzbekistan have agreed to expand strategic customs cooperation through digital technologies by modernizing customs through artificial intelligence, digital risk management, and real-time exchange of customs information. Both countries also agreed to expand electronic tracking of transit cargo. Pakistan says Uzbekistan is the first country connected to its Pakistan single window system for advanced customs information on both imports and exports. The agreement was reached in Tashkent on Saturday on the sidelines of the 11th policy-level meeting of UNODC WCO Passenger and Cargo Control Program to enhance international border security. The cooperation comes ahead of an expanded Pakistan-Uzbekistan preferential trade agreement due to take effect on 14th of August, under which both countries will reduce tariffs on nearly 90 product categories. Together, the mayors aim to cut border delays and strengthen supply chains. They also support Pakistan's wider strategy of connecting landlocked Central Asia with international markets through its Arabian seaports. Mariam Sia, A News, Islamabad.
The US is tightening its visa rules as part of efforts to improve immigration compliance. A new policy requires some visitors to pay a refundable security bond before travelling. Seva Rajapova has more from Tashkent.
The U.S. State Department has announced that from the 3rd of August, visa bonds will become a permanent requirement for citizens of 50 countries applying for B1 business and B2 tourist visas. Under the program, consular officers may require applicants to pay a refundable bond of $10,000, $15,000 or $20,000. The measure is designed to ensure visitors leave the United States before their authorized stay expires. The deposit is returned automatically once the visa holder departs on time or if the entry to the U.S. is denied. The program was first introduced as a pilot in August 2025 before being expanded earlier this year. The list is based primarily on visa overstay rates. Out of the 50 countries, the largest share, 29, are in Africa. In Asia, it covers 8 countries, including Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, while Georgia is the only country from the South Caucasus on the list. The program also includes several Pacific Island nations and 6 countries from Latin America and the Caribbean, including Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. According to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, visa overstays among nationals from countries covered by the program fell from more than 45,000 to fewer than 50 during its first 10 months, although visa issued to those countries also declined by 83%. The announcement follows a separate U.S. proposal to introduce a $100,000 financial bond for certain green card applicants as Washington continues studying immigration and visa compliance measures. Sivili Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
After the break, we'll continue with the stories making the news from around the world. We'll be right back. Welcome back, you're watching Prime Time. Russia and Ukraine have exchanged another wave of attacks, leaving civilians dead and key infrastructure damaged on both sides. Here's the latest from the conflict.
Russian officials say 7 people, including 3 children, were killed and 40 others injured in what Moscow described as a Ukrainian drone attack on the Black Sea resort of Gelendzhik. Ukraine did not immediately comment. Elsewhere, Russian officials said Ukrainian forces launched an air attack on the Belgorod region, where they claimed more than 1,600 attacks over the past week had killed 14 civilians and injured more than 100. 3 civilians were killed and 2 wounded in a separate overnight attack on the Russian-occupied Crimean Peninsula, according to its Russia-installed governor. In the Vladimir region, Russian retailer Wildberries said one of its logistics facilities was hit. Staff were evacuated to safety with no casualties reported. Russia's transport ministry said drone strikes on vessels had heightened tensions in the Sea of Azov and that measures were being taken to maintain freight traffic in the Azov Black Sea basin. Moscow also claimed its forces struck 3 ships carrying military goods in Ukraine's part of the Black Sea and a cargo vessel at the port of Mykolaiv. The developments followed deadly Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities on Sunday and Monday. In the latest strike, a Russian attack on a petrol station in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region killed 3 people, according to the regional governor. Russian troops have stepped up their strikes on fuel stations across Ukraine in recent weeks. 8 Russian guided bombs struck Zaporizhia within 90 minutes on Sunday. That's according to regional governor Ivan Fedorov. In Slovyansk, 3 people were killed and 4 injured when another guided bomb struck the city center, destroying a house and damaging the surrounding area.
President Trump has said new talks with Iran will begin later today after he called off what he said were massive strikes planned on the country. Trump said he had been asked by Gulf allies to give diplomacy another chance, whilst Iran has denied making any appeals to the US.
US President Donald Trump says the United States is returning to the negotiating table with Iran after calling off plans for a major military strike. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump said talks would begin on Monday afternoon. He claimed the US had been preparing what he described as the biggest attack since World War II, but decided to hold back after appeals from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and, he said, Iran.
I was asked to by Saudi Arabia, by UAE, and by Qatar, and by Iran. We were all set to go. Just about at this time right now, and it would have been a massive attack. We're all set to go, but when the allies ask to call it off, you got to sort of say, well, let's see. And the reason they asked is I think there's a deal. There's a deal on Hormuz, and then there will be a deal on the nuclear, or you might call it the denuclearization of Iran. I call it the denuclearization of Iran.
However, Iran rejected Trump's claim that it asked Washington to cancel the planned strikes. State and semi-official media dismissed the comments as false, insisting Tehran had made no such request. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said negotiations with Oman over arrangements for the Strait of Hormuz are in their final stages. Iranian officials stressed the talks are focused on shipping routes and do not amount to an agreement to fully reopen the strategic waterway. The strait remains at the center of the crisis after months of conflict between Iran and the United States disrupted one of the world's most important energy corridors. Despite Trump's optimism, it remains unclear where Monday's talks will take place, who will attend, or whether they will produce a broader agreement on Iran's nuclear program.
And finally this evening, France's most severe wildfires in decades are stretching emergency services, exposing gaps in preparedness and fueling a growing political crisis. This comes as President Macron's approval rating falls to a record low ahead of the 2027 election.
77 years after its worst recorded fire season, France is once again engulfed in flames. Since January, infernos have destroyed hundreds of structures and forced approximately 260,000 people to evacuate, while a breakthrough in the Gironde region enabled nearly 200,000 evacuees to return. Emergency services remain stretched to their limits.
In an exhibition centre in Bordeaux, the largest centre of its kind for those that have been displaced because of the fire. When it comes to the response, French President Emmanuel Macron says that the French people are standing shoulder to shoulder with difficult conditions, winds swirling. First responders say that this kind of outreach, this kind of support to assist crews on the ground is urgently needed as blazes continue to wreak havoc both here in the region of Gironde.
Yet that air support was severely compromised when the crisis began. Official reports confirm nearly half of France's 12 amphibious Canadair water bombers were out of service for maintenance, raising serious questions about federal preparedness. In response, President Emmanuel Macron repeated his stance, asking, who could have predicted? The exact defense he used during the 2022 heatwaves. Critics, however, point out that climate scientists have issued explicit warnings for years. With Macron's approval rating now near 20%, even centrist allies preparing for the 2027 presidential race are notably distancing themselves from the Élysée Palace. And as analysts note, this recurring domestic vulnerability is directly undercutting France's global image.
Internationally, France has long positioned itself at the vanguard of climate diplomacy, from helping architect the Paris Agreement to championing aggressive European Green Deal framework. So really, on the European stage, it undercuts France's moral authority. It forces the government on the defensive, demonstrating that managing climate resilience at home is vastly more difficult than preaching transition targets abroad.
The governance challenge is compounded by a fractured National Assembly split into three uncompromising blocs. On the far right, Marine Le Pen's party criticizes the shortage of equipment, despite having previously voted for civil security budget cuts. On the far left, Jean-Luc Mélenchon is leveraging the disaster to demand an overhaul of the Fifth Republic's constitution altogether. The frustration is shared even within the government's own ranks. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu publicly warned of a growing risk that citizens feel disgusted by a political class detached from reality. As fierce Mistral winds reignite fires in the southern Var region tonight, the gap between the political debate in Paris and the reality on the ground continues to widen. With more than 24 candidates already jockeying for the 2027 presidency, the ongoing fires are ensuring that disaster management and state readiness will remain at the very center of French politics.
That's all we've got time for tonight on Prime Time. From all of us here in the studio, thank you very much for watching and have a safe and restful evening. Good night.